The wind didn't just howl, it screamed. It tore at the worn fabric of Zahara Harper's dress, a dress she'd worn to her own wedding and now wore to her husband's burial. She stood over the crooked wooden cross, a splintered thing stabbed into the dry, cracked earth. Beneath it was Thomas, her Thomas. Her hands gripped her son Caleb's small shoulders so tight he whimpered. She loosened her hold, her fingers trembling as they brushed through his dusty hair. The words wouldn't come. They were buried down there with him. Behind her, the Grayson men stood like vultures waiting for the last breath. Victor, Thomas's older brother, spat a thick glob of tobacco juice into the dirt. His boots scuffed the ground, impatient. "Ain't no sense in standing here all day," he said, his voice rough. "The dead don't care for long goodbyes." Zahara turned slowly, her eyes locking onto his. A fire started in her chest, hot and sharp. "He was your brother." Victor scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. "My brother made his choices, Zahara. Same as you did hitching yourself to him. Now he's in the dirt, and we gotta be practical." Practical. The word was a knife in her gut. She glanced at the others. Samuel, the youngest, couldn't meet her eyes. Their father, Henry Grayson, was a stone statue, his face unreadable. He hadn't spoken a word. It was as if she and Caleb were already ghosts. Victor adjusted his hat, squinting at the sinking sun. "We're leavin'," he said, nodding toward the horses. Zahara's mind, sluggish with grief, tried to catch up. "Leaving?" she repeated. Caleb's little hands clutched her skirt tighter. Victor's jaw tightened. "Yeah, we got a long ride. We ain't waitin'." A cold dread spread through her veins. "You mean to leave us behind? Me and Caleb?" Victor exhaled sharply, like she was the dumbest creature he'd ever met. "Look, Zahara, you got no claim to this homestead. My brother married you, sure. But this is Grayson land. Always has been. And it don't belong to a woman who can't pull her own weight." The meaning hit her like a punch. She was 5 months pregnant, her belly rounding under her dress. To them, she wasn't family. She was a burden. A dead weight. "I can still work," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Don't matter," Victor cut her off. "A widow with a kid, and another on the way. We ain't got enough to go around. We're not carrying you." "Thomas would never have allowed this," she whispered, the memory of her husband's promises a cruel echo. Henry Grayson finally spoke, his voice like rocks grinding together. "Thomas ain't here." She squared her shoulders, refusing to let them see her break. "You can't just abandon us. Where will we go?" Victor smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. "That's your problem, not ours." He turned and swung into his saddle. Henry followed without a single glance. Samuel hesitated, his eyes flickering with regret, before he mounted up and rode after them. Zahara stood frozen, watching them shrink into the distance, leaving only a cloud of dust and the whistling wind. She was alone. Her and Caleb, against a world that didn't care if they lived or died. Caleb sniffled. "Mama, where do we go now?" She knelt down, forcing a shaky smile. "We'll figure it out." But as she looked at the endless, unforgiving land, she knew they hadn't just been abandoned. They had been given a death sentence. By nightfall, the temperature had plummeted. Zahara had dragged their meager supplies from the shed, a small sack of dried meat, a near-empty water skin, a frayed blanket, and an old rusted rifle. She built a weak fire that flickered pitifully against the vast, crushing darkness. Caleb curled against her, drifting into an uneasy sleep. She cradled the rifle, its cold weight a strange comfort. The prairie came alive with sounds, distant howls, rustling grass. Every noise sent her heart hammering against her ribs. Wolves could smell weakness, so could men. Snap! A branch cracked in the distance. Zahara bolted upright, jerking the rifle to her shoulder. The fire's dim glow made the shadows twist and dance. She couldn't see a thing. "Mama!" Caleb stirred, his voice sleepy and scared. "Shh!" She hushed, her eyes darting through the darkness. Then, a gunshot split the night. It was too close, too deliberate. Her pulse roared in her ears. "We have to go," she whispered, scooping Caleb into her arms. She stumbled to her feet, her pregnant belly making every step clumsy. She didn't know where to run, only that staying meant death. Another gunshot rang out behind them, closer this time. It was followed by a low, chilling sound. Laughter. Rough, cruel laughter that sent ice down her spine. Someone was out there. They were hunting them for sport. Panic clawed at her throat. Her foot caught on a root, and she stumbled, nearly dropping Caleb. He cried out, and she hushed him, her eyes scanning the dark. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Pounding the earth, getting louder, closer. Her blood ran cold. She didn't think. She just ran, the uneven ground jarring her bones. The sound of the rider closed in, relentless, then stopped. Zahara whirled around, rifle raised, her arms shaking. A lone figure sat atop a horse, silhouetted against the moon. He was a Navajo warrior, his dark eyes locked on hers, calm and unreadable. "Stay back," she warned, her voice cracking. He didn't move. But before she could decide what to do, the grass rustled behind her. A second shadow was creeping closer. She was surrounded. Trapped. "You run. You die," the warrior said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos in her mind. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. She had no idea if this man was an ally or another enemy, but she knew one thing for sure. Alone, they wouldn't survive the night. Her hands shook as she lowered the rifle. "What do you want?" He didn't answer. He just watched her. Then, with a slow nod, he slid off his horse. In one swift motion, he stepped forward, lifted her onto the horse, and hoisted Caleb up in front of her. She barely had time to grab the warrior's shoulders before the horse surged forward, carrying them deep into the unknown darkness. They rode for hours, the wind stinging her face. Caleb pressed against her chest, his small hands clutching her dress. The warrior never spoke, guiding the horse through hidden paths and narrow ravines she never knew existed. In the distance, she could hear faint shouts. The men who were hunting her hadn't given up. Whoever they were persistent. As dawn crept closer, the horse slowed, stopping in a narrow canyon. The warrior dismounted, his eyes scanning the horizon behind them. "You can't stay here," he said, his voice low. Her exhausted mind struggled to catch up. "What do you mean?" He pointed back the way they'd come. "The men who followed you won't stop. They work for your husband's brother." The words hit her like a physical blow. Victor. It wasn't just random predators in the night. It was Victor. He hadn't just abandoned her. He had sent men to hunt her down, to erase her and Caleb completely. But why? The homestead wasn't worth this. There was something else. Something she didn't know. "Then what do I do?" she asked, her voice tight. He handed her a water skin. "Survive." He watched her drink, his dark eyes taking in every detail. "I am Cale. Zahara. This is my son, Caleb." He nodded as if he already knew. "Why are you helping us?" she asked, searching his face for an answer. For the first time, his expression shifted, a crack in his calm mask. "Because Victor Grayson is not just your enemy. He is mine." The words hung in the air, heavy with a history she couldn't see. He looked out at the horizon. "Now, you learn to fight." The word jolted her. She'd never imagined she'd need to fight, but she'd never been left for dead before. She thought of Victor's cruel smirk, of the baby growing inside her, of Caleb's trusting hand in hers. Her jaw tightened. "Then teach me." Days melted into weeks in the hidden Navajo encampment. Cale was a relentless teacher. He taught her to track, to move without a sound, and to shoot. The rifle felt like a lead weight, its barrel cold and unforgiving. She stood in the canyon shadow, sweat beading on her forehead, and aimed at a wooden post. Bang! The bullet kicked up dirt a foot wide of the target. She cursed under her breath. "Again," Cale said, his voice calm. She reset her stance, her arms aching. Bang! Another miss. "I can't do this," she muttered. He stepped closer, adjusting her grip. "You're fighting the gun. Breathe with it." She clenched her jaw and tried again. Bang! The bullet grazed the post, splintering the edge. Caleb, sitting nearby, clapped his hands. "Mama hit it!" A small breath of relief escaped her. But before she could savor it, a sharp whistle pierced the air. A tall, broad-shouldered man named Torin strode toward them. His dark eyes burned with distrust. "A white woman with a gun," he said, his voice edged with suspicion. "Should we be worried?" "She learns to defend herself," Cale said. Torin's stare shifted to Zahara. "Defend against who? Us?" "I defend my son against anyone who would hurt him," she said, holding his gaze. Torin studied her for a long moment, then turned to Cale. "Elder Tuma wants to speak with you." The elder was an old man with deep lines carved into his face. His gaze was heavy with a wisdom she couldn't hope to understand. He spoke in his own language, and Cale translated. "He wants to know what you will do when your enemies come for you." She thought of Victor's face, contorted with hate. "I'll fight," she said, her voice clear. Cale translated, and something flickered in the old man's eyes. "You may stay," Cale said, "but you must prove your worth." She threw herself into the work, weaving baskets, gathering herbs, tending fires. Her hands blistered, but it felt good to have a purpose. Torin watched her from a distance, waiting for her to fail. She didn't give him the satisfaction. At night, she'd sit outside their small hut, the feeling of being watched clinging to her. Not by Torin, but by something else. Something waiting beyond the cliffs. One night, Cale approached her. "You don't sleep," he observed. "I can't," she said. "I feel it. Something's coming." He stood silent for a long moment. "Because it is." Before she could ask what he meant, the sound of hoofbeats shattered the stillness. A single rider burst from the darkness, shouting frantically. Cale's face hardened. He turned to her, his voice low and urgent. "They found you." Her heart stopped. She rushed into the hut and shook Caleb awake. Outside, the village erupted into motion. Torches flared to life across the darkened plain. And then she saw them. Riders, their figures growing larger, closer. Victor Grayson rode at the front. His men fanned out behind him, their eyes glinting in the torchlight. He reined his horse to a stop, a smirk curling his lips. "Well, look at this," he drawled. "Thought we left you for dead, Zahara. Seems you found yourself some new friends." Rage boiled in her chest. She stepped forward, her grip on the rifle steady. "You lost the right to say where I belong the day you abandoned us." His smirk faded. "I ain't here to argue. I'm here to take back what's mine." Her stomach twisted. "What's yours?" His eyes slid past her to Caleb, the boy. Fear, blinding and sharp, lashed through her. She moved in front of Caleb, shielding him. "Over my dead body." Victor grinned, a predator's smile. "That can be arranged." But it wasn't his men who fired first. A gunshot cracked the air, and one of Victor's riders yelped, tumbling from his horse. Cale stood a few paces ahead, his rifle still smoking. "You are not welcome here," he said. Victor's face twisted into a snarl. "This ain't your fight, savage." "It is now," Cale said. The world exploded into chaos. Gunfire split the air as Victor's men charged forward. The Navajo warriors met them head-on, arrows slicing through the dark. A man lunged at Zahara, his blade glinting. She jerked the rifle up, catching the blow with the barrel. He sneered and shoved her, but she twisted, swinging the rifle's butt into his temple. He crumpled to the dirt. Another attacker charged. She didn't hesitate. She raised the rifle and fired. The bullet slammed into his chest, and he fell. Something cold settled over her. She had taken a life. There was no time to process it. A blur of movement caught her eye. Victor was stalking toward Caleb, a knife in his hand. "No!" she screamed, breaking into a sprint. Victor yanked Caleb up by his arm. "Come on, boy," he growled. Zahara's vision tunneled. She fired, and the bullet struck Victor's leg. He howled, dropping Caleb as he fell to his knees. She didn't stop. She lunged, slamming into him, sending them both sprawling. He twisted beneath her, flipping her onto her back, his hands closing around her throat. "Should have died when I left you," he snarled. Spots danced in her vision. Her lungs burned. Then, suddenly, Victor jerked back with a sharp gasp. Cale stood behind him, a bloody knife in his hand. Victor's eyes widened, blood bubbling at his mouth as he slumped forward, lifeless. The fight was over. Victor's remaining men fled into the darkness. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of fires and the groans of the wounded. Zahara coughed, gasping for air as Caleb ran to her, burying his face in her chest. "It's over," she whispered, holding him tight. Cale knelt beside her, offering a hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Their eyes met, a bond forged in blood and survival. She had fought. She had won. But as the adrenaline faded, a chilling question remained. Why was Victor so desperate to get Caleb? It wasn't about the land. It was something more. Something Thomas must have known. And whatever it was, she had a feeling the danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. In the aftermath, Cale found a leather pouch on Victor's body. It wasn't money. It was a folded, yellowed piece of paper. A map. It showed their old homestead, but it also showed markings that stretched far beyond, into the canyons, into Navajo land. There was a symbol drawn near the cliffs that bordered the encampment. A star, crudely sketched in ink. "Thomas drew this," she whispered, recognizing her husband's handwriting. The numbers, the lines, they were all his. But what was he mapping? Cale's face was grim. He pointed to the symbol. "This is the mark for the Spider-Woman's eye. A cave system. Forbidden." They took the map to Elder Tuma. The old man's eyes, usually so calm, darkened as he studied it. He spoke for a long time, his voice low and grave. Cale translated. "He says your husband came to him a year ago. Thomas knew the Graysons were stealing cattle, that they were looking for something on this land. He made a promise to the elder, a promise to protect this place." The truth hit Zahara with the force of a physical blow. Thomas hadn't been a simple farmer. He had been a guardian. He had been standing between his family's greed and the Navajo's sacred land, and it had gotten him killed. His death wasn't an accident. It was an execution. "Victor killed him," she said, the words tasting like ash. "He killed his own brother for a map." Elder Tuma spoke again. Cale listened, then looked at Zahara. "He says the Spider-Woman's eye is not a gold mine. It is a burial site, the resting place of our ancestors. To disturb it is to curse the land." The Graysons weren't looking for riches. They were looking to destroy, to desecrate the land so they could claim it, arguing it was haunted and worthless to the Navajo. It was a plan so vile, so full of hate, her mind could barely comprehend it. And Caleb. They wanted Caleb because Thomas must have told his son where the cave entrance was hidden. A secret passed from father to son, now a death sentence. The next few days were a blur. The weight of Thomas's secret war settled on Zahara's shoulders. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the keeper of his promise. One evening, as she stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, Cale approached. "You have a choice," he said, his voice quiet. "You can take your son and leave. Go somewhere far from here where the Grayson name can't touch you." She looked down at the encampment, at Caleb playing with the other children, his laughter drifting up on the wind. She thought of Thomas, dying to protect this place. She thought of the hate in Victor's eyes, a poison that wouldn't stop with his death. His father, Henry, and his brother, Samuel, were still out there. They wouldn't just forget the map. They would come back. She turned to Cale, a fire in her eyes he had never seen before. "No, running is what they expect. Thomas died trying to stop them. I'm not going to let his death be for nothing. This is our home now, and we will defend it." A faint flicker of approval passed through Cale's dark eyes. The sun sank below the horizon, and Zahara Harper squared her shoulders. She was no longer a grieving widow. She was a warrior, reborn in fire and blood. The prairie lay open before her, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Whatever came next, she would meet it head on, rifle in her hands. She was ready not just to survive, but to finish the war her husband had started. If you believe that the family you choose can be stronger than the one you're born into, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you want more stories about the fight for justice on the untamed frontier, make sure you subscribe. You never know what secrets are just waiting to be uncovered.